Hello, Possums. Gonna try again. This is a rescheduled chat with Caitlin. It was meant to happen on Tuesday, but we had some technical difficulties. Instagram had technical difficulties. Let's hope it works this evening. Here we. Excuse me. Mm. Ah. Oh, hello.
Oi, oi.
Hello,
Yes,
beauty. You know
it's
what?
working.
I'm just gonna I'm just gonna make sure nobody starts writing things like "it's frozen," "you're frozen." Oh
You
no,
jokes.
it
Yeah.
looks like
I,
everything's working
to be fair though, if I was someone
beautiful.
watching this, I would now, as a joke, go, it's frozen. I can't hear what you're saying. Guys,
Oh well, I've got to say, that said, your reception has gone a bit skew with.
no, no. Is it going weird now? Oh, don't. I
Yeah,
can't do
you've
this
gone
again.
robotic, but I kind of like it.
Am I a
Gone a little
robot
bit
now?
robotic, but it's kind of working at the same time.
Do I
A
sound like I'm
really
in
beautiful,
Craftwork?
sexy robot.
Sexy
No, you just
robot.
look like it, which is even better. No,
All right.
I
Is it
think that's.
functional?
Oh yeah, actually, you know what? I love this. Lily Allen's telling us. Caitlin's Wi-Fi is actually a bit iffy.
It's not my Wi-Fi. It's
Oh,
been working
bless
fine
us.
all day. Lily, I've been zooming all day. It's been fine. It's
There
it's
we
it's
go.
it's the general internet. Someone said they've just had an orgasm
Now I
seeing
can
me.
see
Amazing.
you, Mum, and my mum's tweeting. Anyway, now you're beautiful and clear. Remember, so last time, are you also sweating your tits off where you are as well? It's 10 degrees cooler up north where I am.
Oh, it's just I was gonna do it to the very last minute. I was gonna do this in my bra, and then I spilt all like tomato sauce on my bra, and I was like, now it looks like I'm having a period on my bra. I do need to have some kind of standards. I will put a top on, but last time I put all my eyeliner on, but I've just sweated it off. But I'm wearing this non-smudge mascara, which has smudged off my face and smudged me here, and I can't get it off. So I look like I have a tiny off-center Hitler mustache, no
Oh,
eyeliner, and
no,
a lot of
it's like,
grey.
no, it's more Frida Kahlo-esque, just a
Good,
little bit to
yeah.
the side. Beautiful.
Little
Last,
tash, little tash.
little beautiful Tash. Last time we were chatting, well, we attempted to. I
Yes.
was asking, like, because obviously there's so much I could bloody ask you. There's so many things. But focusing on your music journalism, which many people might not be aware of that time.
Yes,
Um,
no. It's my
it's,
secret
it
past. Yes. My
is a
shameful
secret,
secret past. Yeah.
but not so secret because don't you, in your new book, How to Build a Girl, in your newest novel,
Yes.
don't you, is that not based on your time at Melody Maker?
Yes. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I fictionalized it so that people wouldn't sue me because it's clearly based on, I mean, it's about a fat girl from Wolverhampton who becomes a music journalist at the age of 16. So at the front it has to say this is fiction. But all the people who are in it who are bastards know who they are. And they should be ashamed of themselves. But I am one of the people who should be ashamed because so the idea of the book, which is now a film, How to Build a Girl, is out on the 24th of July.
Oh, hello.
So my music journalism past will be. That's why one of the. I mean, I wanted to do this because I just love talking to you, and we are well overdue a night at the pub. So if we have to do it this way, so be it. But secondly, because the film is basically all about how wrong you can go being a music journalist and like how immoral that can be, kind of what the climate was, particularly in the 90s when I was growing up, and how in many ways it can be an ignoble job because you're given a power that you are in no way qualified to wield, and it's you use it often very ill-advisedly and cruelly.
So then let's go back. So this starts at, is it the age of 16?
Yes.
How did you get, because a lot of people, they don't know how the hell you get into these jobs.
Yeah. I mean,
So, yeah.
yes. Well, my backstory is strange, and I'll do the most truncated version. So I'm the eldest of eight children. We were home educated, didn't go to school. And I didn't know any, so this is like, so by this time I'm 16, so this is like 1989, 1990. I know nothing about popular culture because we had our TV taken away because we couldn't afford it. And we don't listen to the radio, we just listen to the 10 records my dad has. My dad is a jazz drummer, had been in a band, and he knew so much about music and took so many drugs that he just narrowed down all the music that he needed to 5 albums. We had the entire Beatles back catalogue, we had an album by Yes, we had the best of Simon and Garfunkel, and we had Stevie Wonder. That was it. So that's all
Good.
I knew about music. Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad education, to be fair. And that was all the music we had in the house. And I did not know there was such a job as being a music journalist. I didn't know the music press existed. But as a musician, my dad would get this magazine called Making Music, which was all about the tech and producing and great synthesizers. And they had one page in it that would report the worst excesses of the music press at that time. So this is like the late 80s, early 90s, when it was the sort of height of that pretentious music journalist thing that Steve Wright used to parody on Radio 1. People would just be going, this sounds like dolphins mating in midair, or this is a shattered cathedral of fabulous imagery and stuff. And they put it in there to mock it. And I read this in this free magazine and went, this is great. I want to write like this. People are getting paid to write this kind of balls. This looks fun. So that was why I became a music journalist. I knew nothing about music, didn't know about music journalism, but I was like, it seems you don't need to be qualified to do this, and it seems like something I would be able to do. And the one sad thing about the music press not really existing anymore is if you were a working class kid with no contacts, no education, you could get a job in the music press like that if you could write something funny or halfway decent. So I just sent them a couple of reviews. I reviewed 2 of my dad's albums, and I got an Aztec Camera album out of the library. And I listened to it, and that was my first ever indie music, and I was like, this is amazing. And I wrote 3 reviews and sent it off, and they gave me a job. And so from day one, I was paid to learn how to become a writer by going off to get the first gig I ever saw was the first gig I ever reviewed. So the first gig I ever reviewed was the first time I'd ever been to a gig. So I was like, my review was like, I can't even remember who it was. It was a band that had a juggler. And my review was just like I'd seen all of Woodstock. I was like, I can't believe it. The atmosphere, the people, the lights, a stage, instruments. This is blowing my mind. These people will rule the world. They didn't go on and rule the world. I was blown away by the whole thing. The minute I knew what contemporary music was and what being a music journalist was, I was like, this is great. This is an amazing job.
But it's when you're saying there about it being essentially, music journalism could act as a kind of gateway into other forms of journalism or into being an author. Yeah. And so that's really important. And I think do you think that's being lost now?
It has, absolutely. Mine was the very last generation that came through. So like kind of the path would be if you had some talent, you'd start off in the music press, then you'd go onto the style magazines, the monthlies, you'd go on and work for the Face. Then you might get taken up by either the like sort of GQ or Esquire or Elle or Marie Claire, and then you go onto the broadsheets and become a columnist. And so sort of like that's how Julie Burchill started, that's how Stu McConey started, sort of like, all these broadcasters that we see, that was the way if you were working class you could get into it. And that ladder has now been removed. And what we have instead is blogging, which means more people can do it, but you don't get paid for it. So it necessarily puts a class barrier to becoming a writer because you can write, but you're not getting paid for it. So if you have to earn your money, then you only have time to write part-time your blog, and you just won't be able to progress as quickly as someone who can do it full-time because they're being supported by parents. Yeah. So that was the good thing about the music press. It was a way if you were working class to get in, get paid, make contacts, make your way through the industry. That's gone. But the bad things about the music press were also quite multiple.
Well, we'll get into that, bloody hell. Because you're a 16-year-old young woman at Melody Maker. What were your peers? How were you treated there? As an
young woman is a very elevated and optimistic description of what I was at the time. I was essentially a monkey in a dress wearing a hat, and I was a child, and so I had no idea. I didn't go to school, so I had not been socialized at all. I hadn't been around grown-ups. I'd never been to London. I'd never talked to a man I wasn't related to. So my idea for what you would do if you became a music journalist was that you would be Janis Joplin. That was as near as I could get to any kind of template of being a woman. So I turned up in a dress, and it was an 11 o'clock editorial meeting, and I brought a bottle of, I think it was Southern Comfort out of my rucksack, and a packet of fags, which I'd only started smoking the week before in preparation for this meeting. And I just put the bottle down on the table and was like, shot anyone? And then lit a cigarette, possibly 2, just in order to show I was a grown-up, because that was the only way I could think to show that I was a grown-up, was to drink and smoke at 11 o'clock in the morning. Just so in case anyone's in doubt, that's not how you be a grown-up. It's slightly more complicated than that. It usually involves paying taxes, not killing people.
Yeah, it is a really fun thing, but unfortunately we can't keep that up forever. Damn it. But I mean, even that, like the idea of you showing up and you're like, oh yeah, here's what a journalist is, and I suppose you're wanting to impress because you've got these. You're interviewing some really famous musicians as well. Is there that in the back of your head as well? how do I make them like me?
That was all I wanted to do. I mean, I really misunderstood what being a music journalist was in terms of interviewing. I just thought that essentially what you could do is ring up a press officer and say, I want to be friends with Evan Dando from the Lemonheads. Could I meet him at 12 o'clock next week in a pub and spend 2 hours with him? And then they would say yes, and then he would become my friend. And the first half of
Friends.
that would happen. You could just like, yeah, I mean, actually he was too handsome for me. I would have died in his presence. But that's essentially what you could do. You could ring up and order a rock star to be delivered to a bar, and then you would talk to them. And I presumed we'd all become friends. And in all the time that, and in all the bands and famous people that I've interviewed, I think I've made friends with 2 of them. Like kind of, that's not how it works. But it took me a long time to realize that. So after about 6 months, I realized they weren't becoming my friends and we weren't hanging out and living in a big house together like the monkeys. So then I was like, okay, let's step this up a gear. Maybe I should start having sex with them. Maybe that's how you become friends with people. You have sex with them first, and that would work. And I wanted to have sex with the people I thought were geniuses. And I realized very quickly that when you're having sex with someone who's a genius, you're not having sex with the music. Like, the genius isn't inside them. There's no such thing as penis. Like, kind of, the genius is not in their penis. Like, kind of, you're just literally having sex with the man. It's the music isn't playing. You're far better off to stay at home, listen to the album, and have a wank. Like, fucking your heroes is a fairly lackluster, experience.
I'm like, which ones, Caitlin? Which ones? No, don't.
I can't. One of them's dead. It's quite the story. He ended up, it's a very long story, but he ended up passing out in my bedroom, and I had to ring his tour manager and say he's passed out in my room naked. And the tour manager, as if this had happened a million times, went, just drag him outside your hotel room door and close the door and we'll go and fetch him. And so I just had to drag this naked pop star by his ankles out of the door, leave him in the hallway, and then just close the door. And 10 minutes later, I heard the tour manager come up and go, come on, let's take you to bed. So, yeah.
So speaking about you killing people,
Yes.
Okay, this is quite crude of me, but whatever.
I didn't. No. Just to make that clear, he didn't die that night. He died 10 years later. That was simple unconsciousness. I so far have not killed anyone.
Not yet. Well.
Kurt Cobain. I killed Kurt Cobain.
Can you please tell us about this Courtney? Well, you've interviewed her a bunch of times. So please tell us about Courtney Love and those interviews.
Yeah. So she was one of my heroes, like, kind of, and still is, because she was the first woman I had seen who wasn't scared. Like, you forget now, this is such a boom time for female musicians, but back then it was still considered very odd for, a woman was like a kind of genetic freak if she was musical. Like, kind of, you were allowed 1 or 2 women a year were allowed to be weird and fabulous and bizarre, and that was kind of your lot. And so Courtney came along. And it was at that time my choice of role models was either her or Margaret Thatcher. So I chose Courtney. So that went wrong. Not a secret out there, because she didn't seem scared. And I was so scared of everything, and she seemed absolutely fearless. Of course, in later years, you realize most of it was a front, and she was just faking it till she made it. But I just loved that she could fake it. And so I interviewed her. I'd interviewed her once, and then I went out to Seattle and interviewed her. And that was quite the night. She was in high spirits. We did a photo shoot that started 3 hours late. Then after the photo shoot, she wanted to get something to eat. So me and the whole band got in a van and went out to a diner where Eric Erlandson from Hole had very long hair at the time. And there was a redneck guy in a Queen t-shirt who just started shouting, faggot, you gay, you're a faggot. And the band took him to one side and educated him on how if you're wearing a Queen t-shirt and you're being homophobic, there's some information that you need to learn quite quickly about your hero. And that got a bit fisty. So then we got in the van again and we drove around. And we were just driving. I mean, this is so weird. We were just driving. I was like 19. We're driving around and we drive past a student house where some people are having a party. They're sort of out on the lawn drinking. And Courtney goes, stop the car. Let's get out here. And we all get out and we gate crash this student party in the suburbs of Seattle. And it takes about a minute for everyone to realize it's Courtney Love. And and there's kegs of beer everywhere. And we go into one of the kids' bedrooms and he's got a Nirvana poster on the wall. And they're like, take a picture next to your husband. This is 1994. Take a picture next to your husband with the poster. And she stands next to the poster and mimes injecting heroin into her arm next to a poster of her husband. And they're all taking pictures. And then a man puts his penis in my hand. And I have to say to Courtney, can we go? This has got a bit edgy. And we go back to the hotel. We do a 12-hour interview. We really seem to get on. The only problem for me, from a professional point of view, is that I've only brought one cassette with me to record this interview on, one C90, and this interview goes on literally for 12 hours. So I just keep taking it out, pretending I'm getting another one out of the bag, and just putting the same one back in, because any 90 minutes I get in this is going to be incredible. Like, just any 90 minutes, I can just randomly choose one. She's talking about how she lost her virginity in Liverpool, about the first time her and Kurt took ecstasy, and he was obsessed with picking up leaves in the garden, talking about the birth of Francis Bean, all this stuff. And during all of this, one of the things she says is that Billy Corgan, her ex-boyfriend from Smashing Pumpkins, was really good in bed. And that was one of the facts that was on that 90 minutes of tape when I got it back. So I sort of put it in, like, kind of, Billy Corgan, I run the quote in Melody Maker. And then the next week, the week after this is published, Kurt kills himself. And a friend of ours who is friends with Courtney rings me up on the day that we find out he's died and went, well, the reason he killed himself is because the music press was being delivered to his rehab, and he read this interview where Courtney said that Billy was good in bed. He was really paranoid that she was back with him, and that was why he escaped from rehab and shot himself. And this was on my 19th birthday. And it was like, wow, I'm not even 20 and I have killed a spokesman for a generation. This is, no one should have this much power. This is where being a music journalist gets tricky. Like, kind of, I shouldn't be given these powers. I don't know what I'm doing. That's all gone really wrong. I feel bad now.
I probably bloody feel bad. I loved him. I mean,
but no,
this is
I did.
A lot of people did. This is one thing that I wonder about. Bloody hell, Catelyn. This is like journalism back in the day, and I'm talking about especially when you were prominent music journalist back then, compared to now.
Yes,
I find a lot of it. Well, I have my own opinion about it, but how do you find music journalism now, or how artists present themselves now? Is it a completely different thing?
Well, I think the power's shifted immensely because generally artists don't need the music press, and the music press knows that. Like, you can, Beyonce never needs to do another interview in her life. She can just
fine.
Drop an album and a load of, but even so on Beyonce's level, she doesn't need the music press. But even right down to the beginning, like if you go on Instagram, if you go on TikTok, like kind of, you spread things from social media, you can get out there, especially if one person likes you with a platform and retweets you, your music is instantly put in front of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people. And even in its heyday, the music press couldn't put music in front of people. It would put a description of music in front of people, which is why Image and why music journalists liked bands who were like music journalists. Like if it was a band that read the music press and respected the craft, and they were quite wordy and quite literate, and they could talk about theories and all this kind of stuff, music journalists would be like, that's a great guy. We will, that's why Suede was so loved. They understood the music press. Blur, they got it. They enjoyed hanging out with journalists. They would give them the right story. They respected the music press. Whereas if you were like a working class band that didn't read the music press and didn't want to talk about musical theory all day, then we would often give you a really rough ride. We'd be like we didn't like ugly bands. I mean, this is the aesthetic at the time was like, we didn't like ugly bands. We didn't like bands that were stupid. We didn't like bands that didn't like the music press. And we didn't like bands that were just kind of good time bands, that you had to have a reason to be in a band and a theory and a message and a quest. So if you were a band like, say, Ned's Atomic Dustbin, enormously popular, not cool, not beautiful, then we would just bully you. It was like, we can just pick on this band, we would bully people. And the descriptions of people were very physical and very visceral. And it was just really unpleasant. And when I first started at Melody Maker, I was an enthusiast. I was like, wow, all music's amazing. Like, wow, this is all incredible. And then I was taken aside very early on and told that I was writing like an overexcited teenage girl. To which I replied, I am an overexcited teenage girl. I cannot change that. That is what I am. And they were like, we're not going to run that piece. Like, it's just too screamy. It just sounds too knicker-wetty. So it's like, okay, well, the game is then that you have to work out who the cool bands are, who the non-cool bands are, and you need to destroy the non-cool bands. That's the game. And I was like, well, I will do it better than anyone else. And as a result, I became the most vicious, I think, on the paper for a good 6 months, which ended in me reviewing Ned's Atomic Dustbin, because I knew that we hated them, and I was doing the bidding of the cool boys, where I pretended that the lead singer was dead and in his grave, and I was the priest giving the eulogy and throwing earth onto his face. And just saying, your horrible fuckless music, you ugly boys, Like, kind of, it was horrible. And I came into the paper the day it was published, just kind of like, the boys are going to think I was so ace. Like, I went there, did that. And the man who's now my husband, who worked on the paper, just came up to me and went, that was a bit off. That wasn't really.
But that's what I mean, because one thing I wonder is like, because there was like because the journalism then, just like you were mentioning, could be quite scathing and like really, really provocative, just like that. I mean, some of it I kind of miss a bit because it's, just for the goss, the voyeuristic nature of me is like, who's? So now I've got to wait for bands to start on another band on Twitter. Like, oh, Sleaford Mod's called Idols, boring. Oh, yeah, way. Whatever. But then because he would put out articles like this and write things like this, I always I worry about you, but I wonder about, what were there repercussions? Were there bands who held like lifetime vendettas against you? Or...
Well, this is the thing. I didn't know. I mean, again, I've got to remember, I'm a child and no one ever gives you any rules or any guidance. When my husband said that was a bit off, that was the first piece of advice, constructive advice that I got given about my writing. And I've been doing it for nearly 2 years at that point. So you're just sort of, you're thrown in, you just do it. And I had not realized, like I remember the day that I realized that bands read it. I didn't think they read this stuff. So I did one review, in which it was one of those things where it was misunderstood. I reviewed, okay, this in a nutshell is how fucking ridiculous the whole thing is. I didn't have a record player. And I got sent the 7-inch of Cannonball by the Breeders when it came out to review for the singles page that week. And I couldn't listen to it because I didn't have a record player, but I'd been told I needed to review it because that was the big release. Obviously, Cannonball is a deathlessly brilliant song. It's amazing. I hadn't heard it, so I wrote the whole review about, I die to remember this. I've come out in a cold sweat. I wrote the whole thing about how Kim Deal's calves were very muscular because I had seen her live a couple of weeks before, and that was the only thing I could remember.
Like a ballerina / footballer.
And I was just like, and they're so, her calves and her thighs are so big that, when she runs, they must start fires, like kind of, and just did the whole thing. But she read that, her press officer gave it her, she read that and thought I was saying she was fat. So I then got a phone call from the press officer going, I can't believe that you would be fat shaming another woman. And I was like, that wasn't what I was doing. But I mean, it was still a shit review and I shouldn't have been reviewing her legs, but that wasn't what I was doing. But that was it. Kim Deal would never talk to me again. Kim Deal still hates me.
That is it.
Quite rightly, but still.
Fair enough. That's a damn shame. But I guess when I was wondering is like, obviously now, with social media, I mean, you don't seem like a person who is that afraid of what people think about you. I could be misunderstood, but that's kind of how it seems. It's one of the reasons that I love you. But I mean, artists, I think, are terrified to reveal parts of themselves, or even in interviews, terrified, am I going to say the wrong thing? Because, I mean, Lily Allen could just sneeze and she's going to get shit. You know what I mean? Like,
if she doesn't say anything, she gets shit. That's, with a lot of people now, it's got to the point on social media, particularly if you're seen as trying to be a good person or a liberal person, if some issue comes up, if you haven't put your tweet out in half an hour going, I deplore this or I support this, you will get people going, you haven't supported it. And within an hour, they'll presume that you are a racist or you're misogynistic or you're homophobic, that kind of...
You're transphobic. It's really sad.
So even being silent will be seen as something, silence is news. Like, kind of, that's terrifying. I can really understand, like, why now. But with the music press, like, the thing is, if you're in a band, you have no power in that situation. If you think about it, it's so weird. I don't think we'd invent that now. You go and talk to Nadine Shah, go and talk to someone for an hour and a half, and you talk, and you'll be trying to judge if they're a nice person or not, and you'll be going, maybe I'll say this, maybe I won't say this. And then they go away and basically review your conversation. That's so weird. And they can take whatever inference from that you want. And like, there are brilliant journalists out there. There's still amazing writing out there now. I love Dorian Lynskey. I love Jude Rogers. I love all the Lauras. Like, kind of, there's great people out there. Alexis Petridis is just always incredibly funny. My husband is a music journalist. Like, kind of, there are good people out there who won't stitch you up. Particularly if you're a young journalist, the idea that you would go and talk to someone. And also, if you're a young journalist, if you can get a newsline out of it, if you've said something where they can just go, that's the headline, that's the newsline. We'll tell the news desk before we tell the features desk. You've said something that could be misconstrued. You've talked about something that's newsworthy. You've got to have a news angle to it. And you have no power over that at all. Like, you are at the mercy of someone sitting at a table who doesn't know you on a deadline, 2 days after you've spoken to them, deciding what will make, because you're at that point, you are some entertainment. Like, they've got to work out what is the best way to make the fact that they've spoken to you for 2 hours entertaining? And if they're a good person, you will be fine. But if they're not, or if they're on a bad day, or if they've got an editor, I've had editors that have gone in
Oh
and
yeah.
changed whole paragraphs. I mean, that's the biggest nightmare for a journalist who's a good person. You go in and suddenly find a whole new piece has been written sort of in your feature, or the headline looks really contentious. And that's not what the feature says at all, but the headline makes it look like you said something. So, and in that respect, journalists are, are not top of the power tree. It's down to editors and the magazines that you work for as well. But it's a very unequal, it's a risky arena. I mean, I now, when I have to do publicity now, for my projects, and I generally won't be interviewed. I'll write something instead. I'll be like, I'll write something for your paper. I'll write something for your magazine. Because the idea of having to wait and find out what someone thought of our conversation 5 weeks later is terrifying to me. Not least because I've done it.
Just do what I do. Just start a series of conversations, particularly specifically targeted towards journalists, just so you can like butter them up a bit. Especially when your album's out tomorrow.
And it's a fine listen. 5 stars from here. That's a guarantee.
Doing my online stalking of you the past, forever. Obviously I know your favourite band is what? House Martins? Is that your favourite band? But
Crowded House is the other house band.
Crowded House. But you love Kate Bush. You talk about it quite a bit. But I wonder, has there been an artist since Kate Bush that's made you that excited? Where you're
God, billions. I mean, God, PJ Harvey just constantly astonishing to me and blows my mind. When Amy Winehouse turned up, it's still such a small back catalogue, but she was just she was like a cross between a cartoon and all of musical history, just in this one fighty girl who felt too much and was incredibly funny. God, who else? I mean, God, I always go blank when it's like, who do you love? But I mean, I love, we should be at Glastonbury now, and I would just be walking around all the stages, just feeding my head. It would be amazing. I'm just trying to.
No, I'm so glad to hear it, because it's just that I often hear from other people like, there's especially people who have been like involved in music journalism a while ago and not so much now. It's just, I mean, the music industry in general has changed, which is true. But yes. I mean, there's still always going to be great artists, and there's still going to be great stories to write about people. And I'm really glad that you still have this passion for music, which comes across, right?
Yeah, well, also I've got teenage kids as well, so they're just playing stuff in the house, like kind of, stuff, I mean, all they play in the house. Well, they play a huge amount of stuff, but I would never have got into grime unless we just had it pumping out in the house all the time. And like, you suddenly realise the artistry in it.
Yeah, how did they consume music? Because I've read about how you used to, you can tell us, but like, you used to like order an album and you wouldn't be able to get it for a while. From the library.
Yes, I would have to wait. And so there's still, Wolverhampton Central Library, if it's not been closed by austerity cuts, thank you very much, George Osborne, there will still be CDs there whenever, because I was the only person if you ordered something and they didn't have it, they would have to buy it. That was the beauty of and it was such a, it's a brilliant way pre-Spotify to allow poor people to consume music for free whilst the artists are still paid, because I couldn't afford to buy albums, but I wanted to listen to albums. So the local council would buy the albums, thus supporting the artists and allowing me, the poor person, to enjoy the culture of this fabulous country. So there's probably 300 albums still in Central Library that I specifically ordered in, and you can tell that I ordered them in because they would have a blank sticker on the back for them to stamp it out. And I would very carefully write with my calligraphy pen that I got for my Christmas present at the age of 14, Audio Visual Library Wolverhampton at the top of it, in my beautiful calligraphy pen. So if you go to Wolverhampton Central Library and you're getting out the Cocteau Twins or the Blue Nile or Jane's Addiction or the Psychedelic Furs or Kate Bush or Levitation or Cranes or anything that came out between 1992 and 1994 that was indie and white.
Not the House Martins.
No, I mean, I don't not like them, but like kind of, it's mainly Crowded House.
And I think there's something so beautiful about that. It reminds me of, the opening scene of Beauty and the Beast, the Disney version. When Belle,
the best version.
She's like, bonjour, and then she's like walking through and she goes to collect her book, like, it's here for you, Belle, and she's like, merci. I can just visualize you being like Belle, like she's, is it in yet? Is it in yet?
Well, that was what it was like, but with Skinny Puppy and Front 242. But I mean, that's the sadness of libraries being defunded now, because we're a rainy Northern European country, so most of what we have to do is indoors. And indoors, there are only three arenas you can be in. You can be in your home, but your home might not be a safe place or a pleasant place. It might not be somewhere you want to be. Then you could go to the mall, you can go to the shops, but your power there is only as a consumer. You can only really have as good a time as the amount of money that you've got to spend, and it often just makes you feel hollow because they're just showing you loads of stuff you can't afford. But we have a third space, and that's the arts. It's museums and art galleries and libraries, where when you go there, suddenly the power that you have is as a curious person, is as someone who wants to consume culture. You are powerful if you've read the most books of anyone there, or listened to the most records there, or you're walking around and loving the paintings the most. And suddenly your value as a person is on a completely different index to it as in anywhere else. And when you remove provision for the arts, particularly for working class people, then all you have left is the home and the shops. And that is so withering to the soul, and is also so so opposite to the way that the majority of the economy in this country is based. The entertainment industry in this country is either our first or our third, I can't remember which, biggest industry. And now if you're not getting working class kids involved in the creative arts at an early age and not giving them access to it, we're economically fucked. It's not the arts aren't a luxury. It's not like, champagne or cashmere bed socks. We need the arts. Our country is our soft power, our economic power is all in the arts. And once you take the working classes out of it, you have no future, because then it's just middle class people kind of writing plays about divorce and singing songs about their Le Creuset. And I love a Le Creuset casserole dish, but I don't want a whole album on it.
I remember when I first met my producer, Ben Hillier. I'm not from a working class background, but people hear my accent and always assume it.
I'm sorry that I brought the class war to this podcast.
No. I talk about it all the time. And one of the reasons is because people hear my accent and always assume they're like working class. And I'm like, they'll say it when they talk about it. They'll preface my name with it. Working class artist, Nadine Shah. I'm like, no, I've got a Geordie accent. I'm from a middle class background in the Northeast.
Lauren Laverne has the same problem. She's always just people presume that she was born in a bin. She was like, I was born in a house full of music.
She's from down the road, and it's quite nice literally, she's like about 700 meters that way from my house. But I was very, very aware of all the opportunities that were afforded to me. My dad paid for me train to London. I had the choice to be an artist. Having the choice to be an artist is insane. But it's just, when I first met Ben Hillier, my producer, he was saying that, he and so many producers have the same frustration. They're just they take on a lot of love projects nowadays because they are just they're not hearing the best music. They're getting some great music from middle class kids and other kids. Yeah. Of course there's great music.
Yes, of course.
But there is a massive void, massive void of all this beautiful music that should be being made by working class kids. So I'm really glad that you speak about that. And I especially to reiterate your point from earlier on, where you talk about, music journalism being a gateway into being an author and all that. It's beautiful. And you're a superstar for highlighting that. I was talking to Miranda Sawyer the other week.
Lovely Miranda.
She's brilliant. Loves you, mate. Loves you. And we did one of these interviews, and I was saying, tell us your most ridiculous story. And she said, well, there was this one time, and she told me an anecdote about her and Grace Jones. And during this interview, Grace Jones, ends up getting her drunk. Well, they get drunk together. Let's not implicate Grace in anything, but they get drunk together. They have a really great time. And Grace Jones tries to snog her and is like, come back to my room. She's like, no. So, Catholic, can you top that?
I would have done it. Even though I am generally pretty straight, I'm generally penis-based, if Grace Jones wants to have sex with you, I think you should have sex with Grace Jones. I think it's A, impolite not to, and B, anecdote. Don't you want to be able to tell that story forever? Oh my God. And even if when you get down to it, after 5 minutes, you're like, yeah, I'm really not into this and I don't really know what I'm doing. You could just hula hoop together whilst wearing a selection of hats and wigs. It would be amazing. Yeah, I would have. No, I've never had sex. Like Miranda, I've never had sex with Grace Jones either.
It's a real shame.
I've been on a merry-go-round in Milan with the Beastie Boys, smoking the strongest weed I've ever smoked in my life. It was we'd gone to do the photo shoot there, and it was closed down for winter, but they got the merry-go-round to start up so we could do the photo shoot. So they were all sitting on the carousel horses, smoking massive reefers of doobie weed. And they passed it to me, and I didn't want to not smoke the Beastie Boys doobie weed. And fuck it hell, I mean, as you may imagine, they have some pretty choice shit. And yeah, My problem is that I've taken drugs with a great many pop stars, but I'm an absolute lightweight. And once I've had 3 puffs, I will pass out. So, and similarly with cocaine, my biggest shame story is I ended up in the Met Bar because it was the 90s with Blur, who I sort of vaguely knew. Like, I'd sort of met them 4 or 5 times, and Graham used to live around the corner from me in Camden, was always really nice. And we were all sitting at the bar having cocktails, and and I have to say it was none of the band, genuinely it was none of the band, but someone else who was there had an enormous amount of cocaine, and I did some of the cocaine. And then I came back very chatty, and I had to tell Blur my important fact. And my important fact that I leant across the bar to tell them very loudly was, I'm the 5th member of Blur. Like, you guys know it. I'm the 5th member. Like, kind of, it's me, you, me and you. It's like, I am Blur. And then fell backwards off my bar stool, hit my head very, very hard on the floor, passed out, and when I came round, I could just see Graham standing over me going, are you okay? You all right? I was like, I think I might need a cab home. And went home and was quite concussed for quite a long time. Oh, God, I've got horrible... Every time I took cocaine, it ended up really, really badly.
I know, but it was the 90s, so, like, that must have been a lot.
Oh, there was so much. I mean, I probably only did it about 20 times in the end, but each time it ended absolutely disastrously. It was... God, I've got a very long cocaine anecdote. It would take too long to say it, but it ends up with me having to break into my house at 4 o'clock in the morning by stealing a flower pot from my next door neighbour and throwing it through my front room window to break the glass so I can climb in. And then, because it's been a long and sweaty night, getting in the bath, smoking a fag, passing out, and then coming round about an hour later in a bright red bath, because as I climbed through the window, absolutely off my tits, I'd cut myself really badly, and then I got in this warm bath. So it would have looked like, if someone had found me, that I had attempted to take my own life in this bath, when it wasn't. I was just being an idiot. And so I was sort of standing there going, God, this all got a bit heady and eggy, blimey. And then there was a ring on the doorbell, and I opened the door, and it was Radio 1, it was Radio 1 DJ Mark Goodyear at 7:30 in the morning, wearing full jogging gear, having clearly gone for a jog because he's a healthy, clean man. And I went, hello? And he went, I live next door, and I've noticed that one of my flower pots has gone missing. And then I looked at your house and I saw that it had been thrown through your window last night and was in your front room. Could I have it back? I went, yes. Just a moment, Mark Goodyear. Took my bleeding wrists, hiding my bleeding wrists, going and getting the flower pot, handing him back his begonias and going, have a nice day, Mr. Goodyear. Good luck on air.
Who is this mad woman? Yes, here you go. I'm done with it now.
What Mark Goodyear thought my life was like at that point, like, kind of, I keep meaning if I ever see him to just sort of go up to him and go, just so you know, it probably wasn't as bad as you thought it was. I know it looked fairly dramatic, but it was fuckwitchery, nothing else.
Don't tell him, it's his favourite anecdote. Who have been... I'm sorry. I want the bloody goss, and I love it. I'm always so surprised whenever I hear that musicians are rude to journalists. I'm thinking, like, don't bite the hand that feeds you, in a way, because it's like, if you're a dick to them, they're going to write shit about you. Yes. But have you had those hostile interviews, or who's the arseholes?
There was, let's think, who was an arsehole? Well, I mean, to be fair, it was understandable. So Clint Mansell from Pop Will Eat Itself, I was supposed to be interviewing him for the Times, and we were supposed to be meeting in the World's End pub in Camden. And that morning, my continual recurring affliction of terrifying urinary tract infections happened, and I just woke up with the worst cystitis ever.
Cystitis is a bastard. Oh, piss and razor blades. Carry on.
It's the devil's work.
I get it.
So I was in a great deal of pain. It was one of those ones where you just have to get in a hot bath and just sit there doing tiny sad wheeze whilst crying. And so I rang his press officer. Yeah, just like a tiny spoonful of jam, just going, it's all bad.
I really like you. Carry on.
I'm glad that we've now found our level. Hey, if it was urinary tract shit, we could have started on that. I wouldn't have been all like, and the working classes and the libraries and the art and we could have just gone straight to piss.
Tiny sad ways though, it is.
They are so sad. They're the saddest things you'll ever do.
They're really disappointing. You're like, I'm not for... Okay, carry on.
You think it's going to be a lot more, and it's not. So I rang his press officer and went, look, I literally can't leave the house. I'm in so much pain, but can you get him to come to my house? I was only in Hampstead. Just send him around. I'm so sorry. Like, we'll do the interview here. He can come around and I can be in the bath and I'll interview him through the door. I don't want to fuck him about, but I literally...
I could just be in the bath.
I literally can't leave the house. And so he,
No.
half an hour later he turned up and he looked fairly disgruntled. And I went, oh, no, I'm so sorry about this. Thank you for coming over. There's only one problem. Your press officer is a lovely man, but he has not been organised enough to send me your new album. So can you describe it to me? And I will simply talk to you about your description of this album, and then we will be writing about this in the Times. And it's all good. I'm not going to stitch you up. Like, I'm here. I'm on your side. But like, that's how it's going to have to be. I am in pain. I'm in a toweling robe. I smell of urine, and you need to now sing your album to me, Clint Manson. And he fairly understandably got a bit touchy about this and was just, oh, fuck this, and walked off. But I can that's the only walkout that I've had, like kind of.
Oh, come on! But he's also got zero sense of humour. This is hilarious.
I think if you've had cystitis, then you would have sympathised, but men tend not to have had it, so he probably thought I was making it up. So like kind of, I totally understand. We've made up subsequently on the internet, but Kirsty MacColl was a great night out. I went and interviewed Kirsty MacColl, one of the greatest geniuses of our time. That Kite album is just so.
She's my favourite.
She's the best. She's the best. And I knew that was one of the ones where I was like, she must be my friend. I will ring up a press officer and have it delivered to a pub, and we will be friends. And that was one of the occasions where it worked. We just bonded, and like so with the interview went on for hours. She was ordering margaritas. We were just drinking an enormous amount of margaritas. And then she was like, we got to the end of the sort of like, they were kicking us out of the bar, and she went, we should just carry on. And I was like, come back to my house. And she was like, yeah. And she fairly inadvisedly drove a Volvo back to my house, but it was the 90s and you're allowed to do that. Yeah. And and we got back to my house, and it was that point, I don't know about, you probably do because you are a singer. I get to a certain point of drinking where all I want to do is sing. And that's all I want to do. Once I got to a certain point of drunkenness, all I want to do is sing. So she got back, and I was like, I've got Kirsty MacColl in my house. Let's crank up the MacColl jukebox. So I went and got my guitar, which I think only had 3 strings, and was like, sing, Kirsty, sing, and I'll sing with you. And she went, what shall I do? And I went, do They Don't Know. That's the best one, Do They Don't Know.
That's the best one.
Yes. And she said, okay, I'll do it, but only if you do the high note. Now, for people who don't know that song, there's a very, very high note in that song.
Do it.
Well, as you will see. So, and it comes about in the second verse. So the first verse happens, and I think it's the high note. So I go, and she's like, no, not yet. So I'm like, And in the horror of having fucked up when the high note is in front of Kirsty MacColl, thus making it look like I'm not as big a fan as I have pretended to be, I start to feel very nauseous because we have had an enormous amount of margaritas. And so as we get nearer and nearer to that high note, I am fighting back kind of, and when it gets to the bit where I'm supposed to do the high note, I start it, the vom starts to come, I clamp my hand over my mouth, and it shoots out through this little hole here onto her. A jet of vom. At which point I go, I'm so sorry. I'll go and do this in the proper place. And I run off to my toilet, and I'm sick for so long. And when I finally turn around, she's sitting on the edge of my bath, wrapped in a fur coat, smoking a fag, going, you do remind me of myself at your age. I'll give you a piece of advice from a pro. When you go to bed, and you must go to bed now, make sure you lie on your side, not your back, or you might choke on your vomit and die. Thanks for a lovely day, bud, darling. Bye. Stubbed a fag out on the bath and fucked off.
Caitlin, you know what? Grace Jones might have tried to shag Miranda Sawyer. but you vommed on Kirsty MacColl.
I bombed on a hero. You've got to bomb on a hero once in your life. It's on the bucket list, I feel. Yeah.
Oh, she was so fabulous. Her guitarist is in my band. Her brother is my guitarist in my band.
That's how much of a fan you are. Get near her.
I'm a really big fan. Oh, that's a beautiful story. I love that. And I just think, were these years, from 16, fucking hell, a 16-year-old in these environments? I mean, you'd never get away with that now.
No, I mean,
people know you were 16.
Yes, yeah, no, I could not fake that. Yeah, no, I mean, I look back and I'm terrified. Like, my daughter's 16, and I'm like, I moved to London on my 18th birthday, and I didn't really know anyone. I moved down to London with an Alsatian dog and 2 bin bags full of possessions. Oh, it was a great dog. She really was a great dog.
They're my favourite.
They're the best because they're really clever, right? And they're really
best
noble.
Ones.
They're
Those
so
and
noble.
Border Collies.
Yes. That
Yeah.
apparently you only need to tell a border collie something 5 times and it learns it. That is a much faster learning process than I have. So I moved down and I was on my own, and I was going through a time where I believed that it would be cool if I never wore shoes. So for about 6 months, I would walk around Camden in bare feet, which was
All
very
right,
unadvisable.
Janis Joplin.
And
Yeah,
because I thought that was
what
what you
it
would
was.
do. Literally, it's like these are the only days I had in my head.
I nearly
And
said Joss Stone and realised, no, the other one. So
yeah, the one who pretends to
the
be Janis
original.
Joplin. Yes. So in those days, so this is a story I tell to younger people in a kind of, this is how different it was in those days. I moved down to
Yes.
London on my 18th birthday. I was renting a 3-bedroom house in Camden, 1 street away from the Good Mixer pub, which was the Britpop pub. Whenever my phone got cut off, which was very regularly because I didn't know how to pay bills, I literally didn't know how to pay bills. I'd never done that. And so whenever my phone got cut off, people would leave messages in the Good Mixer. So I'd go there and they'd just be handing me Post-it notes going, literally, Courtney Love called you, and kind of like, do you want to go to Milan next week? And opposite me lived Morrissey. So I would wake up every morning and I'd go out onto the front doorstep and I would light a menthol cigarette, because that's the sophisticated cigarette.
Better than brushing your teeth.
2 in 1, right? Am I
2 in
right?
1.
Yeah,
You
it's the minty
correct.
bag. Why did they make those cancerous cigarettes illegal? Where's the scent?
They're delicious.
It's really bit into my routine now. The amount of time to fit in smoking and teeth cleaning in one. I'm not a fucking Kinder Egg. I can't do 2 things at once. It's one or the other.
Sorry. So Morrissey was there.
Yes, and I didn't know this because when the first day that I went outside to have my morning cigarette, there was just a group of about 20 people making a really weird sound. They were all sort of standing in a group making this kind of like a kind of seagully, a sad, yearning seagully sound. And I later realised that that's the sound of intense Morrissey fandom, that they were so full of love for him that they would sort of stand in a circle and just sort of go, Morrissey, very much like his singing voice. And then every so often you'd see him come out, but they would be too shy to go near him and they respected his space, so they'd just let him walk past. And then they'd just stand there continuing to make the sound without him being there, and they'd wait all day, and then he'd come back and they'd make the sound at him again, and then he would go back into his house. And then you'd see Alan Bennett riding past on a bicycle. Nice little local touch, like kind of, it was pretty idyllic, I have to say.
So this is in Camden, and what year was this?
1992.
Oh man, I moved there a lot later. It was the first place I moved to when I moved to London as well.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to be that, and there were parts of it that were that. You know what I mean? There was like still with Amy Winehouse and the Good Mixer, and Graham Coxon's still there sometimes.
Of course.
But this is also me coming into the music industry. I wanted this. The world that you lived in when you were working in the music industry as a journalist, that's kind of what I dreamed of. And then for all the bad that there is, that's kind of what I miss. And I mean, how do you feel? What do you think? What is your honest opinion? I guess your opinion's always going to be bloody honest.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on like the musical landscape now? What do you think it's like for artists now? Do you think it's an exciting place for artists still, or what?
Well, I think in many ways it's terrifying because live's just gone, and like it's such a huge chunk of your revenue. Like performance is gone, streaming is unequal in its profit share, so you can't make money off streaming unless you're Taylor Swift. You can't play live now because of the pandemic.
Getting a whiskey.
Yes, get a whiskey. You need one. I'm about to tell you how fucked your career is, so you need to drink.
Carry on. Having my father's whiskey because I'm so poor.
Oh, it's what he would want, surely. Surely he left you there with have a go on that.
He did. Carry on, my love.
But at the same time, it's interesting because I think there's a big division between white and black artists in this country at the moment, because if you look at the grime model, they are not reliant on the industry. They went and formed their own record labels. They're completely in control of their own careers. They've worked out their own revenue things. They just took care of their business. Not surprisingly, given that the entire history of black artists, particularly in this country, is being massively screwed over by major record labels, not being developed long term, being fucked over in your deals. The fact that this generation went, okay, it's not going to change. We're just going to operate outside that. We're going to take care of our stuff. We promote our stuff. We're going to have our own record labels. We're totally in charge of it. And I'm
and their manager is always like a really good friend as well. And it's like it's all in like a tight.
It's probably family. Exactly. It's like kind of. And the one thing that does surprise me is just why more white artists, just any other artists, don't copy that business model, because it's like that works. Like kind of that works. Obviously, it's more exhausting to take care of all of your business as well, but like that is a business model that works. And like, and if they had time, they could earn tens of thousands of pounds doing business seminars going, this is how we do it. Like kind of this works really well as a business model.
Yeah.
So I think that's the big division at the moment, kind of the sort of the belief that like I remember Stephen Duffy from the Lilac Time and Duran Duran saying that a lot of musicians think that the music industry is like a mummy or a daddy, and it's going to see some worth in you and love you and adopt you and look after you and nurture you. And there comes a time every artist will realize that's not what it is. Like kind of, it's not your mummy, it's not your daddy, it is a business.
It's not. And also I think what I really want to talk to artists about now, especially younger ones that I'm kind of like mentoring, because I bloody love them. But it's like, you can curate your own environment.
Yeah.
And those of them don't realize that.
And yeah, the most interesting artists are the ones that, like, if it's a complete tabula rasa, if you're starting from scratch and you can do anything, what would you do? It doesn't need to be this kind of like record an album, 3 singles off it, build a campaign, you do a tour for this amount of time, here's your range of merch, here's the shows you'll go on, here's the plugger you're going to get, here's the radio shows you want to go on, that's the job. It can be anything. You could write a musical, make a film that puts all of your songs in it and record it yourself on your iPhone and stream it. Like kind of, you could start with the merch.
This is what like fascinates me about younger people, because like my generation, I just missed that whole. I'm still kind of like half PJ Harvey, half Billie Eilish time.
Yes.
Where it's like younger people, younger than me. I'm 34. They're much more savvy when it comes to the technical side of things, and they're fucking cool as shit, and they show a lot as well. Whereas the PJ Harveys are really mysterious and all the rest of it. But then I guess that make your job a bit easier when you get. Did you ever interview her?
Yes, I did. It was she's brilliant and amazing, and it was a piece that I really loved because it was the first album that she did after she broke up with Nick Cave. So he did the album, is it The Boatman Calls, which is all about her. Yeah. Every song is about her, how broken he is, how much he loves it. It's an amazing album. Every single song is about her. And then it was announced that she was writing a breakup album, and everyone was like, of course she'll write it all about Nick Cave. Who wouldn't write an album about Nick Cave? If you've been banging Nick Cave, you'd write an album about banging Nick Cave. And it came out, and it was 12 songs about her. Each one was a different aspect of her personality, and each one of those songs was a song about herself. And I thought that was such a massive big lady dick move. It was so fucking clever and so brilliant. And it was at that point you go, whoa, you're really another game to everybody else. This is amazing. And at that point, that was a real low point for feminism around that time. She got so stitched by the music press. There were so many horrible things written about her.
Really?
Yeah, just like kind of, she was just the whole thing about her being a farming girl, like kind of like being a country girl. She would be constantly written about as kind of like, I love killing sheep and rabbits. I'm a simple country girl. And then she did the nude cover of The Enemy, and that was seen as weird. And like, she was just sort of written about as this kind of, she didn't really like the music press, so she was written about as a weird other thing. But then it's weird, I went back and read the music press recently. I was reading reviews of Björk, and they were just talking about her putting on this little girl act and pretending to be like a little doll thing, and kind of like talking about it like she was kind of trying to aim herself to a paedophile market with debut.
I guess it's overly sexualized kind of like. Oh, yeah,
it's an album about clubbing. Like, where are you finding a weird paedophile doll angle to this? She's someone who's completely in control of her own career. She's just gone solo. She's written one of the definitive albums of Have I Gone Floppy?
It's because they're looking for it.
Oh, right, sorry.
Like,
sorry. But you realise how much of it was about the male gaze at that time. And one of the good things about the music industry now is like there are so many more women writing about women, and like kind of, so you're not having to like. I realised until very recently, I was thinking about who I was, how a man would see me. It wasn't even, I was not connecting with what I thought about me. I was going, what would a man think of, how would they describe me at this point? Because I'd grown up reading male literature. So I would describe myself in the way that Philip Roth would describe a woman, or Raymond Chandler would describe a woman. I didn't have a female vocabulary for describing myself. And for female artists being put through that sieve, like kind of, it must have been incredibly destructive.
Well, yeah, because even now it's like I've constantly been pitted against, well, in the beginning of my career was constantly pitted against other female artists. Like, so what do you really think about Anna Calvi? I'm like, really? She's really fit and she's brilliant, but can you, I mean, like, what do you really think? I'm like, I really think she's class, fuck off. But did you have any pressures like that when you were working as a music journalist to like, can you stir something up here or?
Well, what you're talking about there, that's the queen bee syndrome as they describe it in feminism, which I'm sure you know about, the whole thing that there can only be one woman. It's a man's world, but one woman is allowed through. So for you to become successful, you would have to destroy Anna Calvi. and it would never occur to me
Which
that you two could get together. And like, which is why it was amazing when PJ Harvey and Björk duetted together on the Brit Awards, because it had been like, who's going to win? Is it the crazy pixie or the kind of, the rock and roll farmer girl? And it was like, no, we're going to duet together. We're going to do a cover of the Stones and fuck you all. So that was pretty amazing. But the thing is that when I was working at Melody Maker, there was so few female bands, and every 6 months, what they would do is go, we should do a cover, we should do a woman on the cover, we should do a women in rock cover, and you should go and interview them because you're a girl, and you need to ask them what it's like being a woman in music. And even as a 16-year-old child, I was like, how can I ask women what it's like to be a woman? I know. They know.
Yeah,
Who
I mean, do you get asked those kind of questions as well? Like, as a what? I don't know.
Thankfully, since
Oops. Oh, it's frozen a little bit. Oh yeah, back here.
Shit, it says I've got 5 minutes left of battery, so this is a race against time. This is the internet versus me wondering where I put a charger. Hang on, keep talking.
Because she's been charging a vape. Not a fucking phone.
Literally that. I now need to take the USB.
But also, Caitlin, I love you for getting your priority, because I do the exact same thing. I charge this light that makes me look pretty.
You're joining me live.
Caitlin, I charge the light that makes me look pretty. There's this light here that makes me look nice. I charge that, not my phone. Mine's also dying, but I've got about 12%. But hang on, you were saying there about, we were talking about women being pitted against each other. But then, yes, carry on.
But that was but since I wrote a book about feminism, people are too scared to ask me about being a woman now, because I made it very clear that will make me tetchy.
Do you get called, Caitlin, do you get called outspoken? Do you ever get referred to?
Yeah, I don't mind so much outspoken. So here's a weird thing about the English language. All the words to describe someone who's funny are the most embarrassing words in the world. So zany, quirky, wacky, funstrous, like they're all awful words. Like, and all the words
I get zany and wacky.
Yeah,
I don't like it.
And the thing is, millions of women like you. Like, all the women I know are like this. It's not weird to me that you would be funny and clever and thoughtful and stupid and amazing. Like, kind of, this is how women come. Like, kind of, how does this seem weird to you? I'm always perplexed when people go, wow, you're so weird and unusual. It's like, all the women I know are like this. Like, kind of, there was sort of 10 years ago, I remember there was this big thing that women couldn't be funny. Martin Amis wrote a piece about this. Christopher Hitchens wrote a piece like this. And
something on Twitter recently, I saw you like listing reams of like the funniest women in the world, because somebody had mentioned like a surprise at a funny female or something.
Yeah, so I just started listing them, and I did about 6 tweets listing people, and then just my fingers got tired and I became bored. But it was like, and at the end of it, having listed all these people, and the funniest people in the world at the moment are women, and I went, and last of all, not forgetting your mums, your friends, and your sisters, because like everyone's sisters and friends and a lot of our mums are really fucking funny. Our aunts are really funny. Like, our grandmothers are really funny. Like, they know how to be funny, because women have to be funny, because if we were not making jokes, we would explode from fury. Like, it's like, if you can't make a joke about this, I mean, we have babies. Like, a person comes out of your hole. That's so weird and so incorrect.
If I ever have one, it's coming out the sunroof. Also, too posh to push, love. Don't let this accent fool you.
No, absolutely do it. No, do it.
1.5 minutes remaining.
Shit. Okay.
Can I give you loads of praise really quickly?
Yeah.
It's just like, but it's really cool to have, like, you know what it's like? It's a bit like, I imagine, because like you were just saying there, like everyone, some people's mothers or sisters or friends, and I imagine for a lot of people, they haven't got a friend like you in their friend circle, but it feels like you're probably, like, I have a friend like you in my friend circle. One of my best mates, Jackie. Mm-hmm. Exactly, she's a Caitlin. But there's going to be a lot of people that don't have the luxury of having a buddy like you. But then by reading your articles, reading your opinions on social media, it kind of feels like they do have that buddy. So honestly, and for myself too, thank you on behalf of me and everybody else.
Well, thank you. Well, it's, I like to make the funds, I like to do all these things, but the thing I like most is to be useful. And like my job is to sit and think about things and then write things that other people don't have time to put in words or work out. And like kind of, and along the way I'll make some fun and I'll tell stories about my urine, but I like to be useful. And so if you're getting that, or anybody you know is getting that, then my job is done, because I just want to, you read something that I've written and you go, that saved me having to work it out, or yes, that's how I felt, but no one ever said it before.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Is it over? Bye, I love you. I don't want this